Welcome. I'm Rich Weber, your host for the Florida Aviation Network, along with my co-host, Diego Alfonso. We're coming to you from the Howard Hughes exhibit in the Florida Air Museum at the Lakeland Linder Regional Airport for the 39th consecutive year of the Sun and Fun Fly-In Exposition. And if you're not here, you should be here. Welcome, Diego.
Nice to be here. Let me tell you, I don't think that I can think of any other place that I want to be right now but here.
It's an exciting event. There's a lot of stuff going on.
I'll tell you, I came here for the first time like probably 26 years ago and got hooked. And I've been coming in every year. First, I was just doing it on my own, and then I got together with Obi, and then I became part of the production crew. And so as a volunteer, I've been coming here now for the past 23, 24 years.
You've seen a lot of exciting things, and a lot of changes, a lot of events.
Well, I remember when we first started on the other side, it was just like an empty hangar. It was just a shell. And little by little, a lot of hard work from a lot of good people. Slowly, everything turned from a hangar into a TV studio, and I mean a state-of-the-art TV studio.
Yes, and we're going to be hearing a little bit about some of the history of Sun and Fun from Billy Henderson and one of our upcoming telecasts that everybody needs to tune in for.
Oh, yeah, Billy is probably an icon in this part of the world here, and whenever anything associated with Sun and Fun, he was the founder. I mean, he was in the beginning. Well, actually, it was the EAA, of course, the chapter of EAA, but he was I believe, was the person instrumental in making all these things. Though, just like Obion was the driving force behind the building, what got to be known as the FAA National Resource Center. And I'll tell you, he's just an extraordinary individual. I think that he was the only one that could pull something like that, because when he sets out to do something,
he gets it done.
Oh, man. And he makes sure that you do too.
Yes, you better get it done. Well, we're just saying.
That's right.
Right.
Now, I understand you're based in Jacksonville.
I am based in Jacksonville with the I fly for the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office in the Sheriff's Aviation Unit, and we have a fixed wing operation and a helicopter operation. The helicopter operation is the primary operation of the Sheriff's Aviation Unit, and we provide support to the ground units there in Jacksonville with the police cars that run around in the street. And we provide support to them for apprehending criminals, locating missing persons, whether it be children or elderly people. We've done both, and we've fortunately been successful to finding a lot of missing persons. We also, with having so much water, in Jacksonville, Florida, we've got a lot of water, so we also help with sometimes people getting distressed in boating or swimming mishaps, and we've been successful. Just this past year, we had 3 successful rescue operations where we went and actually saved people's lives with the police helicopter. We trained to be able to exit out of the helicopter and deploy into the water to get these people out. So it's a great asset. We also have a fixed wing operation, as I mentioned, and what we do there is we transport prisoners back from other cities and states where someone might commit a crime in Jacksonville. They'll get a warrant for their arrest, and then they may be apprehended in another city or state, and then it's our responsibility to bring them back to go to court for justice for the victims.
I see. And what kind of airplanes do you use for that? Those details?
Well, the airplane, the fixed wing, we've got a Piper Saratoga, and we primarily fly that in Florida and just in the southeast up into Georgia. A Piper Aerostar, which we fly that one, because of the speed and everything. It's pretty versatile. And we've also got a King Air 200, and it's a military surplus is what we have. So we have some different, depending on the need, is what airplane that we choose for those different missions.
And the thing that was interesting, I didn't know that you, as a police officer, you will also go out there and try to rescue people in boats and stuff like that.
Well, we do, and because we've done the training for it. It wouldn't be something that a agency wouldn't want to do if they don't train for that, because then you can get into some trouble. But with the training that we do, we have been successful, and we've done it for quite some time. That training and preparation to be able to save people's lives. So it's been a great asset for the citizens of Jacksonville.
So I understand you drove all the way from Jacksonville today.
I did this morning.
That must have been a little bit of a trip.
It was a little bit of a drive. Got up a little bit early, and but it's well worth the trip to come to Sun and Fun and help out and try to spread the news for our listeners and our viewers.
Oh, this show is an unbelievable show, and I think it's been a pleasure talking to you, and we're going to continue this conversation in a little while.
Absolutely. Well, what I'd like to our pleasure to introduce to you Mr. Phil Lockwood. Mr. Lockwood, it's a pleasure. Rich Weber, my
Phil,
co-host.
I think we know each other from before.
Well, Mr. Lockwood is the founder of Rotax, and if you would just tell us a little bit about your background and kind of where it's been and where you're going.
Well, I started a Rotax service center in Central Florida back around 1989. So I've been running that Rotax service center ever since then, and I've ventured off and done a few other things. A lot of people know me for designing the AirCam twin-engine open cockpit camera plane, and designed the first one of those for a special National Geographic project in the Congo back in the mid-90s.
Well, you're being quite modest, because you have a great business, and you've provided just a wonderful thing with the engine and the Rotax engine. And tell us a little bit about that, because you actually started out, I believe, in your own garage, right? It's small, and it has grown.
Well, yeah, actually,
that's a great story.
There was a fellow operating that service center up near Daytona, and I became interested in the engines because in the light end of things, the ultralights and the light sport type airplanes, I noticed that a lot of the accidents were precipitated by an engine failure, or preceded by an engine failure. And so I became very interested. I saw that the airframes were actually working pretty well, and that when the motor quit, it was a problem. So I started looking at ways to make the engines run more reliably, how to predict when they needed to be overhauled, what maintenance was really required to keep them reliable, and became quite interested in that. And that led to me wanting to get into Rotax, and so I ended up buying out his service center and then expanding it. And I guess now I think we're probably the largest service center in the country.
Well, absolutely. How would you say? Could you tell us how did you determine then? What changes need to be made? Was it like bench testing and some kind of those types of things?
Rotax has become very good at putting out service manuals and coming up with really good service information. But back in the early days, with the early two-strokes, there wasn't as much information available, and no one really knew exactly how long the engines could be run for before they needed to be torn down, what was the best oil to use so you didn't get rings sticking, things like that. And I just enjoyed doing the testing, and we came up with procedures and tools and things we needed to make the engines more reliable.
Outstanding. That's that's something that's obviously come over a period of time. But if you wouldn't have done that, then the light sport aircraft and the ultralights that these engines are used for would not be where they are today.
Sure. I'll give you an example. You probably find this interesting. With the early two-strokes, we started to find that we were having problems with ring sticking, and that people were having to pull the engines apart to decarbonize them sooner than the engine needed otherwise. I mean, the engine wasn't mechanically worn out, it's just the rings were sticking. And we found that people were causing accidents because they were taking the engine apart and not putting it back together properly, and now they have an engine that's going to give them a problem because they had to decarbonize. So we started trying all these different oils, and we found an oil made by Pennzoil, special air-cooled oil, that worked particularly well. Once we knew and we had tested it, we started promoting it. People started using it. Shell, or not Shell, but at that time Pennzoil cottoned onto that, and they realized, wow, there's a lot of people using this oil, and they had to change the formula. And they were concerned that it might be a
It
problem.
could be an issue.
So they came to us, and we worked with them to perform a 300-hour ground run test using 3 new oils that their engineers had formulated and the old oil that we had had good luck with. And realizing that the changes could have an effect. But they were confident that one of those 3 oils would work better than the other oil. Well, we ran them, and none of them worked well. They weren't good in our application. They'd worked well in others. So they went back to the drawing board, and they engineered 3 new oils. And we ran another 300-hour test with 4 more brand new engines. And sure enough, they found one that worked as well. So those are the kind of things we did. And then that oil carried on to become the most popular oil. And then later on, when Shell bought them out, they had to change the formulation again. And so they came back to us and they said, we need to do this again, but we're going to let Shell do it. Gave them all the data and ran another test and replaced it with an oil that also works very well. But we find that little changes in the oil formulation that may actually be an improvement in other engines, outboards, or don't work well with our engines. And so, those kinds of tests and that kind of reassurance for the customers is people, it's good.
It's critical, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because you don't want that engine to quit, that's for sure.
No.
So that's good. Now, is it like a synthetic blend? Is that what over the years have you come to that?
We've actually tested a lot of synthetic blends, but in the 2 strokes, Rotax prefers a 50-to-1 mixture, which is fairly rich by today's standards. A pure synthetic needs to be run at 100-to-1 or even less, and you don't have much oil on the bearings. And one of the critical parts of these 2-stroke engines is the ball bearings and the needle bearings that are in the crankshaft and the lower rod bearings. And those bearings have to have quite a bit of oil on them in order to protect them when the engine's not running. And as you know, with aircraft engines, that's a big thing. A lot of engines sit for long periods of time. So Rotax wants a lot of oil. They want a 50-to-1 mixture. And so we have to use a mineral-based oil in order for it to be able to run that rich and not stick the rings.
And also be able to sustain not running as well, to where it gives us
well,
some
in
protection.
order to give you a lot of protection, a lot of oil on those bearings, and that works well, yeah.
Interesting.
Those
That's
bearings, any high carbon steel ball bearing, if it doesn't have oil on it, it will rust very rapidly. We did a test once. We took a ball bearing and cleaned it with solvent, got all the oil off of it, blew it off with air, and we'd set it on the bench on a humid day in Florida, and you could actually watch it turn brown as the corrosion started to form.
That quickly.
That's how fast, if it doesn't have oil.
See, and that just can show you how important it is to have the proper oil,
right,
and the maintenance on it, and the proper change intervals, and
sure,
absolutely.
Yep, the maintenance is critical. If you do it right, you have good results. If you don't do it,
you take care of your engine will take care of you. I mean, that's the old adage in aviation. But it's interesting when you were talking about the oils, and I'm a mechanic also. I'm an aviation mechanic, and I'm a pilot, and I remember you when your hair was a lot darker.
I can't tell you how many people have told me that this week.
I hear it too.
Because I'll tell you, I think the first time I saw you must have been like 20 years ago. Easy.
Yeah.
Here.
At
the FAA Safety Center over there, and then you were always there every year, and I was the guy who put the microphone.
I remember
that.
Yeah.
And but there's another thing that you don't know, and that is that I was an FAA inspector up until last July, and I was an interim POI in 141 school that you guys have down there.
Okay.
And, but you never knew this because
No,
I never had I went there like 2 or 3 times and to do inspections, and they were all good. And but you were never there.
Okay.
And but I was
Probably off doing a safety seminar somewhere.
Yes, probably doing that. But going back to the oil, someone told me this, and I really don't know if it's true. That I remember in my days, you buy oil, and you put oil, and then they had something called STP. That was like an additive,
right?
But now, your car engine could go 6,000 miles on an oil change,
Right.
So now I get my oil change, and the guy says, you got to be back in 3,000 miles. And I go, what's wrong with this picture? And so I don't know whether they're trying to get me back as
Well,
soon as or
no, yeah, I recommend you go with the automobile manufacturer's recommendations. For sure, both metallurgy has changed and the oil performance has changed. And so you are seeing oil change intervals pushed out now. I remember Consumer Reports did a test on New York City cabs some time ago. And I think they used a regular mineral-based oil. And they ran a large quantity of the cabs. I think they were Ford Crown Victorias, right? That
Yep.
They used to use. And so they ran a bunch of them with 3,000 mile changes, and the others with 6,000 mile changes. And ran them. They all ran the same kind of duty, and tore the engines down after some large number of miles, 150,000 miles.
Right.
And they couldn't see any difference. So basically what it comes down to is, as long as you don't take the oil to the point where it's worn out, where it's starting to break down, it will continue. And the thing is, you don't want to cross that line. Obviously,
Right.
you want to do it before that happens. I know with some of the new BMW engines, car engines, they use the same Nikasil cylinder technology that Rotax uses in the 4-stroke 9 series engines.
Right.
And that allows for very tight tolerances. And they're very slick, and of course the cylinders don't corrode. And a lot of the BMWs, if you're running the way we do in the U.S., which is pretty mild compared to Germany, where you can run on the Autobahn, 18,000 miles between oil change intervals is not uncommon. And those engines are so tight, and that lubricant is so good that you typically don't have to add any oil in the 18,000 miles.
Wow.
You know, they'll maybe use a quarter of a quart. And we see that same kind of thing happening with the Rotax. Because the cylinder clearances are so tight. A new 912 is 0 to 1,007 inch total piston to cylinder clearance. Unbelievable.
That's nothing.
Unbelievable, the precision. And they use very little oil. And if you're using unleaded fuel, they can go 100 hours between oil change intervals, which in the aviation world is a lot, particularly when you figure that the oil in the oil cooler is going to go 200 hours, right? That oil's not coming out. It's going to go another run. And we did a test with Shell where we ran a couple of our flight school engines to 2,000 hours, 100-hour oil change intervals with unleaded fuel. And they were checking the oil. We were giving them samples to the Shell lab in England, and it was always within spec. And sure enough, when we tore down that engine, after 2,000 hours, there was literally no measurable wear in most of the engine. I mean, piston to cylinder clearance, with the same pistons and the same cylinders, I think was out to 1.5 thousandths after 2,000 hours, running at like 5,000 RPM.
Yeah, because those are...
Yeah, it's just amazing what they're doing today with metal technology and with oil technology. And that's with the new Aeroshell Oil Sport Plus 4, which they designed just for the 4-stroke 9 series Rotax engines.
And now, there is a whole gamma of... Rotax is going into the light sport.
They've pushed into it in a big way, and they actually have about 80% market share worldwide in the light sport. And that 9 series engine we were just talking about, they've built over 40,000 of those engines. A lot of people in the U.S. don't realize, because it's so popular in the rest of the world where fuel prices are so high.
Yes.
And I think it's the most popular piston aircraft engine in the world of any particular model or series.
Mm-hmm. Oh, definitely, and it's here to stay. I'll tell you that, because the light sport part of aviation, it's here to stay.
Well, yeah, with fuel prices where they are, I think people are looking for efficient transportation.
Yeah. The only thing that I really question sometimes, because I remember when the light sport was coming onto the scene, was to provide a inexpensive way to fly, and now, for instance, of course, this is not a Rotax engine, but I found out the other day I got checked out in a Skycatcher,
right,
which is a 0200.
Sure.
And the thing was for $160,000.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
yeah, I think. Unfortunately, what's happened is the volume has dropped through the recession, so that it's forced the price up, and you've seen 172s go from $150,000 to $300,000. Some of that's avionics, but a lot of it is, I think, the very low production volume that they're forced into right now. And it's a double-edged sword because you have to raise the prices of the airplanes to deal with the low volume, but then when you raise the prices, it hurts the sales. So I think they're all in a tough place. Yeah, it's a lot of money to spend $150,000 or so for a really nice light sport, but it's half the price of a 172.
Exactly.
So relative to everything else, they're still inexpensive, but it's hard to look at $150,000, $160,000 as inexpensive.
I was talking to Randy Sweet. He's
Schlitter.
Yep. I have a problem with that.
No,
Remember, I'm Cuban.
I got problems with names too. I understand.
Anyway, he was here. I think it was yesterday or the day before yesterday, and Orlando Aircraft Sales in Orlando, and I was telling him the story. I bought my first airplane in 1969, and it was a '68 model 150, brand new. Somebody ordered it, and then they couldn't pick it up, or there was some problem. It was left over, but it was in Wichita.
Right.
And that thing cost me $6,200. $6,200. And they took off $175 for the ferry trip because I went to pick it up. Not because I wanted to save the $175. I just kind of, the adventure of the trip going out there. I was kind of young, but that's and now a 172 is like more than $250,000.
Yeah, they're expensive. The one bright spot right now for people who want to fly and want to get an airplane is there are so many used airplanes on the market. You can get a good deal on a used airplane. And if somebody wants to get into aviation, for example, you can buy a decent 150 Cessna 150 for about $15,000. That's a good deal.
Right.
And I think because there are so many used airplanes out there, that's a great way for people to get in if they want to own an airplane.
Now, and I want to hear this from Phil Lockwood. If I'm going to buy a light sport aircraft fitted with a Rotax engine, and the purpose of, because my grandkids are coming up, and I think I'm going to be kind of going back to instructing again, limited to them. What kind of engine would you say will fit the bill there?
Well, the 912 ULS, which is the 100 horsepower version, is pretty much the choice for most light sports. Okay. It's an ideal power to weight ratio. It's got 100 horsepower. It'll push the most efficient light sports right to the speed limit of 120 knots. And it doesn't burn much fuel. And the engine has seen a tremendous amount of refinement over the last 23 years, over 300 changes and improvements. And so it's evolved into a very, very good engine.
Now, I've known you for many years, and they say that a good interview somewhere in there it has to bring out the individual, and everybody knows Phil Lockwood, but I really don't know what was the spark that got you interested in aviation. I want to take you back and take me back to the first when you said, aviation is the thing, if you can remember that.
When I was a kid, my dad used to take us up into the Adirondack Mountains in northern New York. It's a huge park, I think about 6 million acres. And we would rent a cabin on a lake up there, Fourth Lake. And one year, he contacted a local float flying operation. I think it was Bird's Air Service. And they brought, I was only 14 or 15 at the time, so I can't remember what it was, but it was probably a Cessna 206.
Okay.
On floats. And the plane came in and taxied up to the dock at the camp we were staying at. And Dad said, hey, anybody wants to go for a ride, I'll treat you to a ride. And I was fortunate enough to be the one to sit in the front right seat. And I loved boats. I did a lot of boating as a kid, but I'd never flown in a small airplane. And so when he taxied out and he powered up, and I was looking at the floats, and I watched them come up on plane and then up on the step, and I saw him rotate, and we took off, and I saw the view, and that was incredible. And that really, I think, got me interested in airplanes.
Good. And did you pursue a pilot certificate or anything? Or?
Well, I decided in high school that I wanted to study aviation further, and so I applied for a university in Florida, Florida Institute of Technology in Melbourne. And I went there and studied for 4 years flight technology and air commerce, aviation business and flight technology, a combination technical. It was a great degree for me.
Yeah.
And got all my flight ratings. And that education has served me well.
Oh yeah, and they're good. Actually, I was the actual POI for that school for about 7 years.
Very
and in Melbourne, they have a great program. They're good.
You know, getting a really good base, a really good base flight training to work from was a good thing for me. When you're 18, I was 18. You learn it, you pick it up so easily, and when you're taught really good habits right at the beginning, it stays with you.
I was telling Doug before that I read a quote, which is anonymous. I really don't know who wrote it, but I'm going to put it on my website. And, of course, I'm going to make sure it says anonymous there. And just to corroborate what you're saying, and it says that in times of crisis, pilots do not rise to the occasion. They default to the level of training. And that went right through me because it makes so much sense. It's just unbelievable. And that's exactly what it is.
It is. It's true. I mean, I went for quite a few years without flying a high-performance airplane or complex airplane. And then all of a sudden I started flying amphibious floats. And I had to remember to put the gear down, get the gear up. And, right away, I went back to those gump checks that were hammered into me. And so it was really quite helpful to have that.
I'll tell you, I'm an instructor. I'm a DPE. I do check rides. And so I've been the whole gamma. And I was just telling Rich that I've done over 6,000 check rides. So I've got to see firsthand,
Wow, that's a lot. When the guy had a good instructor and when he didn't.
Exactly. And here's the thing, the practical test standards, the things that we as examiners look for, are low standards compared to.
Yep.
Well, here's the thing: when you're in the instruction world, the pilot and the instructor are exposed to 3 different standards. The problem is we don't realize that. One is training standards, personal standards, and evaluation standards. And the best kept secret in aviation is that evaluation standards are lower than personal standards and training standards. Because when you train somebody or I train somebody, I want to train him to perfection.
Right.
You and me, when we're doing something, we want to do it to perfection, hopefully. But then the evaluation standards say this is a little lower. Phil, let me tell you, it's gotten to be that point in the interview where we're going to have to say goodbye. It's always a pleasure to chat with you, and brings a lot of memories, and the hair still look good, so don't take that bad.
At least it's still all there,
That's right.
It is getting lighter. But Diego, great to see you again.
Yes.
Rich, great to see you.
Yes, sir, you too.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Well, that was great talking with you, and we learned a lot about the Rotax and what you do. But we want everybody to stay with us. Don't go away. We're going to be talking with the Raiders, the flight demo team coming up. So everybody, don't go away. We'll be back. So keep your channel tuned in. This is Rich Weber with my host Diego Alfonso and Mr. Phil Lockwood. Thanks again, and we will talk to you guys soon.